pleasure. It's just much easier.
Okay, Kuf Beis Amud Beis, 102b, bottom of the page. So till now we've been discussing the three kings who the Torah, who the Mishnah mentions have no share in the world to come. Yerovam, Achav, and Menashe. And now the Gemara raises or begins to discuss the other version, the other opinion in the Mishnah, which says, and this is the quote within, like inside the two sets of colons, the third line from the bottom. Rabbi Huda Omer, Menashe yesh lech elok l'olam haba. This is a quote from the Mishnah. Rabbi Huda disagreed with the opening opinion, which stated that these three kings have no share in the world to come, and Rabbi Huda states that Menashe does have a share in the world to come. Why? Shneimar, as the verse reads, Vayispal Menashe al Hashem, and Menashe davened to Hashem, Vayeteloi, and God turned to him, responded to him. So the fact that he prayed and God returned to him is indicative of the fact that he did Teshuvah. We actually discussed this much way earlier in the Gemara. We talked about how under distress he turned to God, right?
That's right. Also,
under distress, sorry?
The Menashe ki Hashem will Elokim, he knew. So it seems that...
the verse says clearly that he did some tshuva, and Hashem responded to him. His tshuva was accepted. It wasn't just lip service. But remember before, we had it way earlier where he only did it under stress.
That's right.
Where his father, the king, gave him everything he could. Right? They gave him a great education, and it still didn't work for him. And only when he was under stress did he turn to Hashem. Right? And he said the ultimatum there, that if you don't respond to me, then you're just as good as all the other idols who didn't respond to me. He said something like that to Hashem.
Yeah. And also
remember that?
Learned that everyone going to do tshuva.
Oh, so that's what we're going to get to now, the power of Teshuvah.
That's right. Otherwise people would say, there's no hope in it.
That's what we're about to get to. Amr Rabbi Yochanan says, commenting on this dispute in the Mishnah, we have the opening opinion, which is Menashe is part of those who do not have a share in the world to come. Whereas Rabbi Huda says that Menashe does have a share in the world to come, and he did Teshuvah, because verse clearly states that he prayed to Hashem and he was responded to. So Amr Rabbi Yochanan says, V'shneihem, both of these views, Mikra Echad Darshu, both of them were observing one verse when they came to the conclusion either that Menashe did do Teshuvah, or that Menashe does have a share in the world to come, or that he does not have a share in the world to come. They're both analyzing one verse. What's the verse? You know as the verse reads. This is God speaking, I think, through the prophet, I imagine. It's from Yirmiyah. Satim lo lezava l'chol malachas haaretz. I will turn all of the kingdoms of the earth, means all this whole area, lezava, to like wasteland, to terrible state, to horror. Yeah, it's like you say in Yiddish, Shrek.
Shrek, yeah.
Okay, it's exceedingly crazy. It's a horror. So God says, "I'm going to turn this whole place to horror." For what reason? Beglal Menashe ben Chizkiyo, because of Menashe the king. End verse. So Menashe is somehow at the center of the fact that God wants to turn the whole kingdom of Israel into just horror. So how do you come to the conclusion that Menashe did Teshuvah or not? Says the Gemara. Mar Savar. One view is Rabbi Huda's view. Beglal Menashe, when the verse says that the entire country is going to be turned to horror because of Menashe. Why? She'asa Teshuvah, because he did Teshuvah. Ve'inu, but the people loy avud, they didn't follow him. They didn't do it. In other words, because of Menashe, as in because of what Menashe tried to do and they didn't go along with it. One way of reading the verse. Mar Savar, the other one who reads the verse, Tanakama, the opening statement, which says that Menashe does not have a share in the world to come, top of Kod Gimel Amud Aleph, 103a. Menashe, the loy avud Teshuvah. Because of Menashe means simply because he didn't do Teshuvah. And he made everybody follow him, like Rashi points to. So they're both reading the same verse, and that God wants to destroy the land because of Menashe. It doesn't mean because Menashe did Teshuvah and they didn't follow, or because Menashe didn't do Teshuvah and they followed him. We're going to see soon a similar statement, how the leader and the people are almost equal, and that God, one can save the other, as it were, or one can bring detriment to the other. We'll see that soon. Similar kind of thing. Okay. Now we have a statement from Menashe and from Rabbi Yochanan. This is an incredible statement because he's not merely saying, I side with Rabbi Huda, right? The dispute whether or not Menashe did Teshuvah and whether he has a share in the world to come. Rabbi Yochanan could have simply said, I'm of the opinion to follow Rabbi Yehuda, but he makes a much, much stronger statement. Rabbi Yochanan says, Kol ha'omer, anyone who says, Menashe ein lechelek l'mahaba, the Menashe has no share in the world to come, marpa yedein shebal teshuva. He weakens the hands of those who want to do teshuva. What happened to the first opinion in the Mishnah? It's a serious question. I don't know the answer to the question. I'm just making the point. Rabbi Yochanan is making such a very strong statement. He's not merely saying that, I think Rabbi Yehuda is right because of whatever he's about to say, because of the verses from the text he's about to quote. That's not what he says. Anybody who disagrees with me is weakening the hands of those who do teshuva. It's a very strong statement, even though there's a Tana, a sage, which predates him, quoted in the Mishnah, the opening statement of the Mishnah, that Menashe does not have a share in the world to come. So that's one thing to be pointed to, and requires some elaboration, some explanation. Another thing to point to is that you see here already that what Rabbi Yochanan's opinion that Menashe has a share in the world to come is not because of some text. That's secondary. The primary here is he's looking at the world around him and he says, what do the people need from me, from the Torah? What does Torah? Torah needs to, Torah doesn't need to do anything, but he needs to teach Torah, or Torah should be taught in such a way that it inspires people to get better. And if we're going to go with this route, it's not going to inspire the people. It's an interesting way of looking at it. In other words, one could argue and say, look, Menashe does not have a share in the world to come, and therefore go, shake your finger at the people and say, don't become like Menashe. And Rabbi Yochanan says you're doing it wrong. You do it that way, you're going to weaken the hands of the Baal Teshuva. On the contrary, tell them, look at Menashe. As terrible as he was able to do teshuva. So can you. It's kind of like a teaching, not so much in Menashe's behavior in Menashe's life, but much more. It's much more of a teaching, I think, of how one ought to be teaching Torah and how Rabbi Yochanan chose to teach Torah. Opening his statement by saying, my view of Menashe's statement is not because of what Menashe did or didn't do, but because of the effect it's going to have on the people around me now, today, here. And therefore, if you don't take this view, you're weakening the people you're trying to inspire.
Just to clarify my own mind, in the Mishnah's point of view, did Menashe even attempt to do teshuva?
Everybody has to agree to try to do teshuva because the verse says so.
Okay.
The question is whether he got the show in the world to come as a result or not. Second view, yes. First view, no. Rabbi Yochanan is saying if you take the view that it's no, you're destroying Baal Teshuva. You're telling them that it's a waste of time. So therefore, you ought to, or you should, take the view that that his teshuva was accepted, and therefore you can use this as a model to inspire your.
I'm just wondering if you can reconcile it by taking the position that the Mishnah is saying that his teshuva wasn't really sincere, it wasn't a real teshuva.
So that's what you have to say.
Therefore, he has no share in the world to come. Whereas the other point of view is, yes, he really was sincere. Don't question his sincerity so much. Whatever he did, he tried to do, and we shouldn't weaken everyone else's teshuva.
That would make sense. In other words, the opening view is saying that he did teshuva, but it wasn't sincere. That's possible, especially since the Gemara said earlier it was only because of distress, and he also gives God this ultimatum. Nonetheless, Rabbi Yochanan still wants to go with the positive.
Yeah,
that would make sense.
for
sure. Okay, so now let's see the text, the proof text of Rabbi Yochanan to back up this idea that he must have had the share in the world to come. Third line, top of the page, Kov Gimel. Third line. Fourth word, the Tani. The Tani, Tana, Kamei, Shal Baal Teshuva, and the fourth word. The Tani, Tana, Kamei, Rabbi Yochanan. For the following was taught in the presence of Rabbi Yochanan. This was Rabbi Yochanan's teaching. Or was taught in his presence and he accepted it. Menashe asa teshuva. Menashe did teshuva l'shloshim v'shalosh shanim for 33 years straight. Now what you just said what you just said explains the following Gemara. And let me just translate and I'll explain what I mean. There was a question that I had that just answered by what you said. So let's first read the Gemara. So what's the Rabbi Yochanan's proof? It says Menashe did teshuva for 33 years straight. The Ksiv, because the verse reads, Ben shteim asa shana Menashe b'malchai. Menashe was 12 years old when he became king. And he reigned for 55 years. Okay, so he's 12 plus 55. How old is he now?
67.
Okay. And he did that which was bad in God's eyes the same way Achav did. So says Rabbi Yochanan, Kama Malach Achav. That's the end quote from the verse. Now it speaks of Yochanan. Kama Malach Achav. How long did Achav live for? How long was Achav king for? As in V'trein Shnin, he was king for 22 years. Menashe Kama Malach, but how long was Menashe king for? Chamishim v'chamish. We just said it was 55.
33.
So 22 Dal Menayu Esim V'tartin minus 22 from 55.
33.
Parshulot plus 33. So this is the Gemara's. This is Rabbi Yochanan's calculation. The verse said that he sinned the same way Achav did. So the same way Achav did, says Rabbi Yochanan, is not just a question of his behavior, but actually how long the behavior lasted. So in the same way, Achav's behavior only lasted for 23 years because he was reigned for
22 years.
22 years at Slas.
Because the alphabet, yeah.
No, Tlas and Tlas, 23.
No, 22 years was Achav reign, and 33 years in the Teshuva.
Hebrew alphabet.
Sorry, yes, correct, sorry. Other way around.
Exactly.
So Achav was only king for 22 years, and therefore Menashe's sin was just like Achav, so it also only lasted for 22 years. And he was king for 55, thus leaving us with 23 years of Teshuvah. Now here's an interesting thing. When I was learning the Gemara first, I was asking myself, if Rabbi was trying to prove that Menashe did Teshuvah, why is he quoting this verse and making the whole calculation? Why don't you just say, the verse said earlier, he cried out to God and God responded. Why isn't that good enough? Because maybe it comes to answer the point you're saying. The first view also agrees that Menashe did Teshuvah. But the first view might say that the Teshuvah wasn't sincere because he was only calling out to God out of distress, and God only responded to him because of the ultimatum. Remember the Gemara earlier, Menashe says that Menashe says to God, if you don't respond to me, I'm going to treat you like every other God. And therefore that verse itself does not show the sincerity of his Teshuvah. But over here, when he's doing Teshuvah for 33 years, 33 years he's ultimating God. There's got to be validity to it. So when I learned the Gemara, I thought of that question, but what you just said answers the question. So therefore, what Rabbi Yochanan is saying is, everybody agrees with Teshuvah. The question is of his sincerity. And Rabbi Yochanan doesn't want to prove that he did Teshuvah. That's not enough to say that he did Teshuvah and God responded, because that wouldn't mean necessarily it's sincere. Rabbi Yochanan wants to prove that it was a sincere Teshuvah. And here it teaches you that the Teshuvah lasts for 33 years, which teaches even more. Rabbi Yochanan is in the context, the whole context of Rabbi Yochanan's statement is that if somebody doesn't say Menashe did Teshuvah, he's weakening the hands of the Baal Teshuva. So what's Rabbi Yochanan's sort of inspiration, or message to the Baal Teshuva, if you will, is that it could take you 33 years. And it could take your entire life. From when he stopped sinning till the end of his reign, he's doing Teshuva the whole time. Don't give up just because you didn't reach what you were hoping to reach in the first 5 minutes, in the first 5 years, in the first 10 years, in the first 20 years. 33 years, that's how long it's taking to do Teshuva. It's a lifelong...
we have to make dvikut with Hashem.
But that itself is a lifelong mission.
Ultimate.
It's not as if, Menashe did Teshuva, God answered him, and everything was fine. No. 33 years straight he was doing Teshuva, from the day he stopped sinning till the end of his reign, basically to the end of his life. He was in one long process of doing Teshuva. This is quite... I've been thinking about this for a long time.
It also matches Sphere Sayim, till
33 is... Yeah, like Boimer, there's a lot of numbers. You mentioned that, right? Like Boimer is 33.
But
They're the same.
It's also Gal Einai. Sorry?
Oh, no, we wouldn't say that now.
I don't know about that. I can't tell you.
Because the Machlekes was he did Mabah. So it's the same pasuk. Kasher asa Achav. Achav is Mabah, so also Menashe.
But that same verse is the reverse.
The same verse was in two ways, exactly. Look at both.
That's true. That's the same verse that he did what Achav did, whereas over here it's being used to say that from that point forward he did Teshuvah. The same verse to the other view that says that he doesn't get Elam Haba because Achav didn't get Elam Haba.
That's right.
So in terms of, so you're saying 33 is Lag Boimer. Lag Boimer, the verse associated with that is Gal Einai, open up my eyes. So it's like 33 years he's trying to get his eyes fully open, as it were. I'm sure there's all kinds of other connections like that. Anyway, so thank you for all your input. That's very geschmack. That's very good. Okay.
Also, he has so much to do because he has done so many sins. Like a regular person maybe do it last time, but one sure even someone as a king control the nation and did awful things. It takes a long time to overcome the Teshuva.
That could be true, but the context here...
Maybe his Teshuva was good, but it wasn't good enough to overcome all this.
That's possible. But on the other hand, the context here is Rabbi Yochanan is talking to all Baal Teshuva. In other words, he's saying, here's your inspiration.
I think the other Mandomer
the other view, okay.
Yeah, maybe. She's a Teshuva, but they're so great, it's not so simple to overcome...
He's a leader who's doing...
A leader, exactly. Quite the Makus Rabbi, exactly.
Yeah.
That
could be.
Yeah, that's why the other side of it. It's not just him alone, it's the people he's drawn to.
Okay. Now, Rabbi Yochanan, since we're talking about Rishim Bar Yochai. Rabbi Yochanan says the name of Rishim Bar...
Yeah, That's right.
Rabbi Yochanan says in the name of Hashem Bar Yochai. We have a few statements now from Rabbi Yochanan in the name of Hashem Bar Yochai.
Yeah, that's true. 33 accepts in this context.
My diksiv, Rabbi Yochanan says in the name of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. What is the meaning of the verse? Which reads, Vayishmalav, Vayechtar. Vayechtar loi, God listened to him.
Vayechtar seems to be a correction. Oh,
Yeah.
Vayater, yeah, okay.
No, Vayechtar loi boile, what it should have said.
We have the Vayater here.
V'chutz ksiv Vayechtar loi. Rashi addresses this, like what's going on here. Because Rabbi Yochanan is about to comment on why the verse says Vayechtar loi instead of saying Vayeter loi. Now the verse as we have it says Vayeter loi.
Yeah.
Which is a bit of a problem. So Rashi seems to be saying, I'm not 100% sure, but Rashi seems to be saying that it's a question of written versus pronunciation. I think that's what Rashi's saying. No, it's not clear. I don't know. It's a little bit strange here, but this is what the Gemara says. Rabbi Yochanan is commenting on why the verse is Vayechter.
This is conceived in Korea. Let's check it.
That's what I thought maybe it means, but
Maybe.
Rashi's not so clear on that.
I know. We'll see if we can check it Tanakh. Just it'd be interesting to see.
You can look in the Gilin Hashas and go see them also.
Sometimes the problem is in printing. It comes to they don't show the.
Yeah, I think it's a kri versus ksiv, meaning sometimes
Sounds like yeah.
sometimes the verse has a word written one way, but it's meant to be pronounced a different way.
Correction.
No. I'm saying
No. The Gemara is making a comment on why the verse says Vayechtar loi.
Yeah.
In referring to God responding to, or God answering Menashe's prayer, the Rabbi Yochanan is about to comment on the fact that it says Vayechtar rather than Vayeter. Now the verse as we see it has the word Vayeter, which makes the whole comment obsolete, if you in a sense. But it seems from what Rashi is trying to say is that oftentimes the verse has one way of being written and one way of being read. So maybe that's what it is. I don't know. This is a troubling statement. But anyway, let's just read what it says, because the Gemara has it. So Rabbi Yochanan is commenting in Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai why the verse is Vayechtar, even though we have the word Vayeter. Says the Gemara Vayeter, Mbale should have said Vayeter.
The Haggadah Sionim says okay in Aleph.
No.
In our text it's written Vayater, and maybe in Rabbi Shimon Yochai's text it's written Vayechater.
He had a different version.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Okay? What does the word Bachutz mean in Rashi? I don't know. Anyway, Melamed. So the bottom line is there's a Vayechter somehow related to this verse, even though the verse, as we know, it only says Vayeter, but somehow the word Vayechter is there either in its pronunciation or in Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's text or something like that. But nonetheless, that word is associated with this verse, so it has to have some teaching. Says the Gemara Melamed, it teaches us. This is Rabbi Yochanan speaking in the name of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Also, like Kadosh Baruch Hu kamin machteres b'rakia, God made for him, for Menashe, a kind of hole in the sky.
Like a tunnel.
Yeah.
Machteres, breaking in the
like a secret passageway.
Yeah.
Like a backdoor entrance. In order to take him into tshuva, because of the attribute of judgment. That is to say, the divine attribute of judgment, the divine attribute of order, structure, and law, says Menashe doesn't come here. Doesn't come into the world to come. Finished. Over. But God himself obviously transcends the very system that he himself put in place. And thus, with Menashe's Teshuva, God made a hole, as it were, to bring him in. Now, one could, okay, that's the end of the statement. One could say that this is further in the context of what I mentioned before, Rabbi Yochanan trying to inspire the Baal Teshuva. That is to say, the Baal Teshuva, or Teshuva itself, has the capacity to completely, fully transcend the system, the divine system itself. It's a cheat game. It's a joker. You have a game.
a wild card.
A wild card where completely overrides all the rules of the game. Right? There's a famous medrash where people are asking, or the medrash is asking different items. What should someone do if they sin? And they ask Torah, they ask Chachma, and each one says something else. One says, I don't remember the order, but one says, let him do teshuvah. One says, the last one says, one who sins, he should die, yamus, because they asked the Kadosh Baruch Hu, what should he do? He asked the teshuvah, he should do teshuvah. As if to say, teshuvah transcends even the systems of divine wisdom, even the systems of, even the Torah to a degree. Right? Teshuvah even changes Torah to a degree. Because Torah says you violate the law, you fail. But teshuvah transcends that. The irony is that the key to teshuvah, which transcends the whole system, is given to you in Torah. Right? That's why it's like the Joker. The Joker ruins all, transcends all the rules of the game. But the rules of the game also say, here's a joker. Right? So in other words, the game itself is set up in such a way that there's a little secret passageway you can transcend the system. And that's kind of what it's saying here. Even though the system of judgment, the system of order and law says, sorry, Menashe, you can't come in here. Your Teshuva is not accepted. But a person does Teshuva for 33 years, really pushing himself, Hashem makes a hole in the sky, as it were. Hashem says, okay, you get a backdoor entrance, transcend the system, even though the system says you don't belong here. Okay. Now another statement from Rabbi Yochanan in this context. This is also requires a lot of thought. It's a pretty incredible statement. For Rabbi Yochanan further stated the name of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. What's the meaning of the verse? Which reads, it was at the opening, or at the beginning, of the kingdom of Yehoiakim, son of Yeshayahu. V'ksiv, and elsewhere it says as well, Bereshis Mamlachat Tzidkiah, which is the beginning of the kingdom of Tzidkiah. Now, says the Gemara, was there no kings until this point? What the Gemara is asking is like this, seemingly. Ordinarily, when the prophet wants to say that the following story happened at the beginning of the reign of so-and-so, it would say, in the first year of his reign. That's the ordinary system. Ordinary way of expressing that you're talking about the beginning of the person's reign. But here it uses the word Bereshis. Bereshis is not just in the year number 1. Bereshis connotes like a new beginning, like a Genesis. Right? The book of Genesis opens up Bereshis in the beginning. So the question becomes, why all of a sudden with these two kings does the Torah use, or does the prophet use the term in the genesis of their kingdom? There were kings before. The first year of his reign, they were continuing the reign of the years of the. They weren't like, it wasn't like they started a new line. They were all inheritors of the kingdom from before. Okay, so it's year number 1. That's what the verse should have said, as Ashi points to. So therefore, the Gemara says that there must be some genesis, something new, something entirely new that happens at the beginning of these two people's reign. Some radical, exactly. Yehoiakim and Tzidkiah. And they are the same thing, but in the complete reverse. How so? Ella rather, says the Gemara like this, because God desired, God wanted to, as it were, to reverse the world to void and nothingness. This whole project called creation, in which there's a Jewish people, and which is Torah and mitzvahs and all the rest of that, a waste of time, failure, scratch it. For what reason? Bishvil Yehoiakim. Because of Yehoiakim the king. That's how terrible he was. It's like, if this is who's king, this is a waste of time. But, Nistakel B'dayrei, God looked at the generation, and God's mind was put at ease, as it were. So, from one perspective, we're looking at the leader of the Jewish people. This was a failed project. But then looking at the people themselves, God says, okay, 1 second, but the people themselves are doing the right thing. Now, the same thing in the reverse, when it comes to Tzidkiah. Because, again, God wanted to reverse the entire world back to nothingness. For what reason? Because of the people who lived during the reign of Tzidkiah. Because of how degenerate they have become. But in Estakabot Tzidkiah, God sees Tzidkiah, the leader himself, and God's mind was put at ease, as it were. So it's the same thing, but in the reverse. In one instance, the people are terrible, the king is good, and therefore for the king itself it's worth to continue this project. And another time it's the reverse, the king is terrible, but the people are good, and therefore it's worth continuing this project. So what this tells you is, perhaps, first of all, it teaches you that of course we're talking about a king and not an individual, and not just a regular person. But to one degree or another, each person is a king in that sense. In other words, the project of creation, God's ultimate purpose, is valuable for one person as it is valuable for a whole generation. So a whole generation could be degenerate, but one person makes it worth it. One person could be doing it wrong, and because of that one person, it might be worth stopping the whole project. Yeah. So it's both ways. One person can save the whole project, and one person can ruin the whole project. It gets to the famous Gemara, every person is obligated to say the world's created for me. In other words, the project that God has for making this world is dependent on me. I can mess it up or I can save it. Which further, getting back, if I can put it in the context of Teshuvah, What it tells you.
More affected to be serious, like you say, look.
Yeah.
always-
So in the context of Teshuvah, we might add that the person, and this connects to something Alter talks about in Igeres Teshuvah, when he talks about Teshuvah as being restoring the divine investor in creation. So first, Alter talks about it on a halachic sense, and he talks about it in the spiritual sense. He says, first of all, Teshuvah restores the person's individual, private relationship with Hashem. Before, there was a break in the line of the divine investor in him, and through Teshuvah, he restores that. But then the Alter adds, there's actually a global issue. Because the entire purpose of creation, this is, I'm paraphrasing what he says there, but Hashem's investor in creation is because he has this project called the Jewish people are going to do Torah mitzvahs. When a person doesn't do that, so like the whole project becomes a waste of time. And when a person does Teshuvah, he doesn't just restore his own personal relationship with Hashem, but he restores the cosmic relationship with Hashem, because now the whole project becomes worth it. So if we're going to put this in the context of Teshuvah, where there's a Bereshit, there's a beginning, there's a Genesis. So with Teshuvah comes a whole new Genesis. Beforehand, the world wasn't the world, and this individual was failing at the project, and from here there's a new Genesis, a new investor in creation. Oh, there's a Jew here worthy of the whole project. Bereshis, beginning, and both individual and collective sense, as we see from this Gemara.
This really refers to a king, though.
I said, I know, even though it refers to a king, but nonetheless you can expand it to
Gemara
everybody.
says because you look at the world as balanced, half yes and half.
It's the Rambam, famous line of the Rambam.
Therefore, one person is a mitzvah, he tips the whole scale.
Bishlin v'olam is also, there's other indications where Jews are also referred to malachim,
From this
even though
Gemara-
literally it means a malach, but you can expand it a little bit more.
No, the king has influence because he sets the policy for the,
Yeah.
and the people follow it.
Okay, let's conclude this Gemara, the final comment in this Gemara. It says the Gemara, but you just finished saying that Tzidkiah, you just finished saying the entire generation was worthy of ending the project called creation, but because of Tzidkiah the king, who was behaving properly, God said, okay, it's worth it to continue going, and therefore it's considered a Genesis. Says the Gemara, but Tzidkiah namik siva yasar rabbeinu Hashem. With respect to Tzidkiah, it also says that he didn't do what was right, so he was also a bad king. So the generation was bad and he was bad. What do you mean that he was good? Says the Gemara, he was a tzaddik, but shahaya b'yadei limchais, he was capable of stopping, because he's king, he was capable of stopping the misbehavior of the people. And he didn't protest, he didn't try stopping them. But nonetheless, the fact still remains that he was a tzaddik. Okay, we'll stop over here, and God willing, some more comments on life in general, which maybe are connected to Teshuvah as well, from Rabbi Yochanan in the name of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Have a wonderful day, everybody.